about your process and competing every day.
How tough is that to do, not to put extra pressure on yourself, not only as a baseball player, but as a human being as well, Matt?
Yeah, certainly easier said than done, right? There's things that we can improve upon every single day, like you said, not only in the baseball field, but in life as well and as a human being. So I try to keep a big picture focus about what's the most important to me in my life and not stress about the things I can't control.
And for Westberg, he could really be a key part of this team in 2024, and he's looking for that bigger role. You could tell that he wants it. He's a baseball player. He grinds, he competes. So expect Westberg to step up, do his thing, and help contribute even more for the season ahead. For now, at spring training in Sarasota, Rocco DeSangro for Sports Unlimited.
All this month, Fox 45 has been saluting our champions of courage as positive role models who keep Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream alive. You can watch our Champions of Courage special tomorrow morning at 11:30 on the CW Baltimore. You can also catch it Sunday, March 3rd on MyTV Baltimore at 1 p.m. and right here on Fox 45 at 11 p.m. Well, coming up on Fox 45 News at 6 o'clock, the House passes the juvenile crime bill in Annapolis after intense debate on the House floor. We press lawmakers on what needs to happen to get it to the governor's desk. What will happen to programs built on ARPA dollars when that funding runs out? Well, Fox 45 takes a look at what comes next if Baltimore spending is being called into question.
There is no amendment to this bill that would satisfy that for me.
Another heated debate over juvenile crime legislation. A closer look at what was addressed today and what comes next. From temporary federal relief funding being used to finance long-term city projects, why some are criticizing the mayor's spending decisions. Plus, the largest wildfire in Texas history, destroying thousands of miles of land. An update from the governor and the efforts to aid those impacted.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 6.
Thanks so much for staying with us tonight. I'm Maxine Stryker. There was a passionate debate on the House floor today as delegates voted again on juvenile crime legislation. The juvenile crime bill in the House passing with overwhelming support, and now its future lies with the Senate. The House version of this legislation calls for the creation of a commission to gather more data about juvenile crime. It also extends probation, involves states' attorneys earlier in the charging process, and expands the Department of Juvenile Services jurisdiction to kids who commit certain crimes between 10 and 12 years old, except for kids who steal cars for the first time and have a gun.
Would be the opportunity for the child to go through a diversion program. If they came back with another charge for car theft, then they would be subject to juvenile jurisdiction.
Well, those diversion programs aren't in place everywhere yet, which is raising some concerns about the reality of implementation.
Does the bill address any funding for diversion programs?
So we don't usually deal with funding, but that is an issue that certainly is part of the budgetary process.
So ultimately, the plan did get bipartisan support, passing the House on a 126-6 vote. That brings us to our question of the day. Will the juvenile crime bills make a difference in the crime crisis? To make your voice heard, head to foxbaltimore.com/vote. Fox 45 also learning more information about the security protocols at the Capitol complex. Yesterday, there was an anonymous call threatening to harm people in the State House. It was then put into a lockdown with people sheltering in place in some office buildings. The State House was then completely evacuated. Senate President Bill Ferguson says protocols were followed, but things could change going forward.
On Monday of this week, we had entered into an agreement with Motorola for a rave alert system, which would allow for geofencing and text messaging alerts for anyone on campus. Certainly, we're going to expedite the contract as quickly as possible. We want to get it right, and we want to have all of the information available.
Well, the hope is to have that system up and running by the end of the session. In the meantime, we expect an after-action report to be released in the coming months. Mayor Scott's use of one-time federal COVID funding is once again coming under fire this week. The mayor recently received stark criticism from two mayoral challengers who argue he's using the money to invest in his own campaign, not the city. And tonight, there are more questions being raised over some of the long-term programs receiving the short-term funding. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor has new information about how your tax dollars are being spent.
Yeah, many of the mayor's ARPA investments will require continued funding, which is why tonight a taxpayer advocate is questioning how the city will continue to afford these programs once that money runs out. Balancing Baltimore's 2024 budget, a battle for city leaders, mainly due to new Kerwin obligations.
It was a gut punch.
The landmark legislation pumping record funding into public education, pushing the city's budget into a multi-million-dollar deficit. To make do, money was shuffled, cuts were made, and now
we know that everybody's going to have to be tightening their belts around here.
Little room is left for strengthening fundamental city departments, including police, fire, and public works.
Looking for large increases in any agency is not something you should be looking for.
However, a saving grace amidst a struggling economy, $641 million in ARPA funding, a one-time gift from the federal government to offset financial hardships brought on by the pandemic. The only caveat, all the money must be spent by 2026. And yet, many of the initiatives Mayor Brandon Scott has chosen to invest in, long-term programs that can't be sustained on short-term funding. Among the mayor's ARPA expenditures coming under fire, nearly $15 million for Clean Corps, a program giving nonprofits funding to help pick up trash in the city.
As soon as that program ends, those communities are going to be right back to where they started from because they're not addressing the root causes.
Another $15 million purchasing 2 hotels to house more than 100 city residents experiencing homelessness. The project, uncharted territory for the city, costing taxpayers an additional $3 million for an outside management group to oversee 9 months of maintenance and operations.
So these costs are going to continue 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
And among the largest ARPA investments, $45 million for Monzi, the agency in charge of the mayor's violence intervention programs. Of that funding, $6 million set aside to expand staffing.
They are hiring a lot of staff, and that's going to be a fiscal liability for the city way after 2026, and the ARPA money runs out. Where is the city going to come up with funds, whether it's Monzi or any other program?
Taxpayer advocate David Williams warning the long-term toll investing in these long-term initiatives will have on residents.
Are they going to have to raise taxes? Or are they going to have to cut services in other areas?
The answer, unclear.
The city missed the point with this funding. It should have been one-time expenditures.
As the city continues to spend funds today, they won't have in the future. I reached out to the mayor about those concerns today. In response, his office sent me a statement reading, quote, "Raising taxes is not an option currently being considered to support these projects. Long-term viability has been at the forefront of all decisions regarding ARPA funding, and attempts to indicate otherwise are unfortunately ill-informed." Reporting in the newsroom, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
As critics question the city's ARPA spending, some are focusing on where the money is not being allocated. The president of the fire union telling Fox 45 News none of the $641 million was allocated to the Baltimore City Fire Department, which has been struggling for years with staffing and equipment shortages. The department is also the busiest in the country with calls per capita. The union says it's frustrating to be denied money because there are so many things they could have used it for.
We could definitely use that money. You know, we were the first line of defense during COVID, and that's definitely something that we're disappointed in. A lot of our firehouses are over 100 years old, and, you know, guys are using their own money to fix up firehouses and keep it together with furniture and the kitchens and outdated bathrooms and everything else for, you know, today's standards.
The mayor's budget last year did include a $15 million increase for the fire department.
It's been challenging. It's been challenging, but we have each other. We are a praying family.
Family of Baltimore officer Kiana Hawley calling for justice. Week one of the trial for the ambush murder of Officer Hawley and civilian Justin Johnson has just wrapped up. Elliot Knox is charged with both murders, along with his co-defendant Trayvon Shaw, who has yet to have his day in court. Back on December 16th, 2021, Officer Kiana Hawley was murdered in an ambush attack as she sat in her patrol car in South Baltimore. 90 minutes later, Justin Johnson, police say, was gunned down in his car in Southwest Baltimore. Video surveillance of Knox's car leading them to him, who prior to the trial in court documents admitted to being present for both murders and to hiding the murder weapons, but naming his co-defendant Trayvon Shaw as the shooter. The state will continue to call witnesses and present evidence on Monday. We have been following this trial every step of the way. For our full coverage from Alexa Ashwell inside the courtroom, head to foxbaltimore.com.
Up to 500 homes and buildings have been destroyed so far by wildfires raging across the Texas Panhandle. Texas Governor Greg Abbott offered a grim update today.
When you look at the damages that have occurred here, it's just gone, completely gone. Nothing left but ashes on the ground.
The Smokehouse Creek fire is the largest in state history, burning about 1,700 square miles. At least 2 people have died. Ranchers are also dealing with considerable cattle losses. Governor Abbott says they need more air support to slow or stop fires in the immediate future. And officials warn there is still a significant threat for new fires with the forecast for this weekend. They are urging residents to be prepared.
No new starts. Over 90% of wildfires are human caused. We've got to get the message out. No new starts. We do not want to divert resources from our existing fires onto a new start fire.
Well, Governor Abbott issued a disaster declaration for 60 counties. He said he is working on a federal disaster request. President Biden says FEMA will reimburse Texas and Oklahoma for their costs. Maxine?
Hi, thank you. Coming up after the break, a massive cyber attack impacting pharmacies across the nation. How the parent company is recovering and the admitted hacker.
I'm Janae Bowens in Washington with a look at why migrants committing crime has become a key political issue.
We're taking a look now at the Fox box. In the top left, health insurance giant United Health Group is confirming a ransomware attack is responsible for disruptions to one of their critical subsidiaries, Change Healthcare. They've been dealing with the attack, which is impacting hospitals and pharmacies across the country. According to the vice president, the group responsible is Alpha Black Cat. The Russian-based ransomware gang took credit. Top right, a New Jersey businessman pleads guilty in the corruption case surrounding U.S. Senator Bob Menendez. Jose Uribe pleaded guilty to 7 charges under the plea deal. He agreed to cooperate with authorities and testify against the other defendants. He is scheduled to be sentenced June 14th. Bottom left, House Republicans have issued new subpoenas in their impeachment inquiry of President Biden. The subpoenas were sent to 2 attorneys in the Department of Justice's tax division and 2 officials who have already testified. Hunter Biden testified behind closed doors earlier this week. In the bottom right, the U.S. will begin airdropping humanitarian aid into Gaza after about 115 Palestinians were killed when Israeli troops allegedly opened fire on a huge crowd of people who were racing to pull goods off an aid convoy. The airdrops will begin in the coming days. Funeral services for the Georgia nursing student allegedly murdered by an illegal migrant were held Friday. Meanwhile, the matter of migrants committing crimes has become a major political issue. National correspondent Janae Bowens has an in-depth look.
Loved ones gathered Friday to honor the life of 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley. She was found murdered last week at the University of Georgia. Jose Antonio Ibarra, a Venezuelan man who's in the U.S. illegally, is accused of killing her.
Now they're getting the public pressure, which is what it's going to take to get President Biden to use the executive authority he has to secure the border.
Riley's death has further turned migrant crime into a political football, with both President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump visiting the border earlier this week.
The United States is being overrun by the Biden migrant crime. It's a new form of vicious violation to our country.
Trump blamed crime on Biden's border policies, although some argue the data doesn't support a migrant crime spike. Meanwhile, Biden focused on border security.
They desperately need more resources, need more agents, more officers, more judges, more equipment in order to secure our border.
Some Democrats, like Congressman Robert Garcia, have reportedly said the immigrant crime narrative is racist and not true. But New York's Mayor Eric Adams sees the problem with what he calls a small number of migrants being violent and dangerous. He's now calling for a modification to the sanctuary city status.
For those who commit serious crimes in the city, they should be able to be deported after they serve their time. And I continue to believe that as a former police officer.
A new poll from Pew Research shows 57% of Americans say the large number of migrants seeking to enter the country leads to more crime.
Now, Maxine, that same poll found 80% of Americans say the government is doing a bad job handling the migrant influx. Now, with the public's negative perception, it appears border security will remain a key campaign issue in the presidential race.
And today, do sanctuary cities experience more crime?
Well, according to research from the Crime and Justice Research Alliance, there was no meaningful data that sanctuary policies impacted homicide rates. Now, there was also no evidence that immigration is connected to robbery at the city level, but as those poll numbers show, perception is reality, despite what the data may say. Maxine?
All right, Janae, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
All right, here's a look at your Fox 45 triple cast. Oh, yeah, you can definitely see there's plenty of rain on the radar there. We also have some traffic. Everyone trying to move about, trying to enjoy some weekend plans. Of course, this evening, the first day of March is also the first day of meteorological spring. Good evening, everyone. What we are tracking, of course, is our next weather maker, and here it is. We're talking about rainfall tonight, so if you are headed out, we will be seeing the rainfall later on this evening. We only have another hour or so before it starts to fall. 47 degrees, so it's on the cool side. You want to have a waterproof jacket if you can head out this evening because it is going to start falling. And if you're out for anything longer than the next, I'd say 45 minutes, you're going to wish you had something to cover up. Here's our next weather maker, and it is continuing to track right into our area. The rain is going to be falling here probably as we tick just into around the 7 or 8 o'clock hours. Very, very light, if at all, coming down across Maryland because the radar is just barely picking it up. It may not quite be reaching the ground yet, but it will. So here's what Future Scan is showing. From 7 o'clock onward, we will likely see the rain continuing to spread by 10. It is widespread, and it will be getting heavy later on tonight, especially after midnight. I'm expecting things to get at their heaviest, and it'll be lingering around all the way through your Saturday morning. So more of that rainfall to come, but luckily some improvements throughout your Saturday afternoon. Likely going to start to see things beginning to taper Saturday afternoon and then drying out by Saturday evening. So you might be able to have a little bit of your Saturday before things completely get washed out. That's a good thing. And temperatures in the 50s. Sunday, no problems whatsoever. Expecting things to be dry, mostly sunny. A few clouds passing here and there, but otherwise we should hit the 60s and have at least a halfway dry weekend for you. All right. Future Scan also showing quite a bit of rainfall. We're talking 1 to 1.5 inches. Some places could get just a bit less than that. This is going to be a good old-fashioned soaker for everyone. Weekend forecast, the only thing you have to worry about, of course, is Saturday morning, really. But temperatures in the 50s. We will warm up on Sunday a bit more, probably another 10 degrees. So quite a change, not like the last storm where it blasted us in with some cold air, the wind. And this one's just going to recover us very quickly. Now, let's take a look at what's going on later in the next week. This is the part that's really interesting. So you're looking at 2 different forecast models, and I want you to see how different they are. This starts on Monday. Now watch as I put it through time here. You'll notice they hardly ever match at all. When one is showing rain over Baltimore, the other one is showing nearly nothing, and that is the case on Wednesday. That's the case as we move into Thursday, possibly even into Friday. So the big takeaway here, next week is going to be busy. It's going to be active, but the timing is going to be very different. We'll have your 10-day forecast in just a bit.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
It was a crystal clear Friday morning in the nation's capital, as we see in this brilliant picture of the Washington Monument reflecting off the tidal basin. Meanwhile, the system that will bring the mid-Atlantic and northeast rain on Saturday is bringing flooding to parts of the southeast now. And the warm weather is breaking up the ice in the Great Lakes. Here are some ice shards that are really piling up along Lake Winnebago's North Shore.
For more content like this, follow the National Weather Desk on TikTok.
Coming up after the break, new developments in former President Trump's classified documents case in Florida, what the defense is asking for in tonight's Assignment America. There are new developments in former President Trump's classified documents case in Florida. After a long day in court, the former president attending to watch his defense team at work. We have a clear picture of the legal strategy both sides will use in the run up to trial, if this makes it to trial at all. Mike Magnoli with our Sinclair sister station in Florida reports.
Trump's defense team telling the judge there was a cast of characters working behind the scenes to make this indictment happen, and they want to know how tangled is that web? How deep does it go? The legal term for that is scope of the prosecution, and the judge could grant them a hearing to try to expose such a thing. Now, as for the dates, the calendar of this trial, that's complicated by the other trials that Trump is facing and the 2024 election. A crowd of former President Trump supporters gathered early Friday morning in Fort Pierce to see the motorcade arrival, and then they rallied all day as a public show of dedication to the defendant. Mr. Trump is accused of mishandling classified records, storing them in boxes at unsecured locations at his resort, a pool storage closet, a bathroom, and a ballroom at Mar-a-Lago. His valet, Walt Nauta, is charged for moving the boxes, and Carlos de Oliveira is charged for deleting files from a computer that contained messages about where to store the boxes. This trial was set for May, but talk of postponing until July or August spiraled into heated accusations from prosecutors that Trump's team is throwing everything they can into pre-trial motions as a delaying tactic. The most consequential pre-trial motion that's sought would put prosecutors on the hot seat to answer questions about how they found out the documents were at Mar-a-Lago. Trump's defense team telling the judge the special counsel's office is a tool of President Biden, and they pointed out that this Department of Justice opted not to charge Biden for mishandling classified documents while they're throwing the book at former President Trump. No indication when the judge might decide about these motions or start trying to lock in some dates. And this, as the Supreme Court says, it will take up the issue of presidential immunity. That could throw a monkey wrench into this whole scenario. As the president was leaving the federal courthouse, we could just make out his figure in the backseat of the vehicle. You can see him through the tinted windows here, fist pumping the crowd. He had a lot of supporters here. In Fort Pierce, Florida, I'm Mike Magnoli reporting.
All right, let's take a look. First of all, radar picture's been pretty busy.